All right, hello everyone. Thanks for being here today. So if you haven't muted your microphone yet, please do so. So the sound will be better for everyone. My name is Marc-Olivier Bourdeau. I'm the marketing coordinator here at Consortec. And don't worry, you won't have to hear my bad English too long, as I'm going to be with co-hosting this webinar with my colleague Leslie McKenzie, and she's a real expert. So I'm just going to do a real quick introduction to Consortec, give the agenda, and then she'll take it from there. So today we're going to give you 3 ways to increase your geospatial data processing efficiency, all this by using the Fme Server software. And yeah, so the point is to give you like three type of examples that you can reproduce in your organization to increase your efficiency. So to tell you a bit about Leslie, Leslie McKenzie is a senior business analyst here at Consortec. She has graduated from McGill University with a Bachelor of Arts in Geography. She's passionate about geomatics and has been working in the field for over 14 years. Our main focus is leveraging ETL with the context of data workflow and process optimization. At Consortec, Leslie provides consulting, training, and solution design services on various GIS and IT platforms, including Safe Software, Fme Desktop, and Fme Server, of course. Our motivation lies in helping our customers develop automated data workflow processes so they can focus on the fun stuff, the real GIS work. Leslie was one of the first specialists in North America to obtain Safe Software, Fme Certified Trainer, and Fme Certified Professional certification. So, hi, Leslie.
Hi.
So, before we get going, if you have any questions, there's the you can always write in the chat box on your left. And if you have other questions, you might want to raise your hand or anything. And I will be looking at that chat box throughout the whole presentation while Leslie is speaking. So the agenda, we're going to get going with what is Fme. So real quick, little introduction to Fme Desktop. And then Leslie is going to give you a quick introduction to Fme Server. And then we're going to get going with the 3 examples, the 3 use cases on scheduling jobs to ensuring staff is leveraging the latest updated information across the organization, and the job triggering through automations to trigger a job to run based on an event such as a file arriving in a folder, an email, or from a web service. This allows for responsive or near real-time data processing. And then the providing on-demand services, upload or download data, allowing staff, partners, contractors to get the right information when needed. So a bit about Consortec. We've been in business for not close, but for actually 30 years this year. It's our 30th anniversary. We have a team of 10 certified experts certified on Fme. We like to say we have the best Fme experts in North America, and we've worked on over 100 projects, yet all in with GIS and IT professionals to create automated data workflows to make you save time and money. Also, and at least we've been partnered with Safe Software for 20 years now this year, and we are the only platinum partner, Safe Software only platinum partner in North America. So enough for that. We're going to get going with Leslie. She'll tell you the objective of this webinar.
Hi. So today what we're going to do is we're going to look at Fme Server and how it differs from Fme Desktop and how our clients use Fme Server to take what they do on Fme Desktop and accomplish more with it. So the ability to automate things and orchestrate, more complex data processes. It's actually based going to be based on 3 relatively simple things where we find that our clients draw most of their value from FME. So I'm going to start with a really quick, what is FME, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page for the presentation, even though I'm sure there's a lot of people who already know Fme Desktop in the organization, so in the audience today. So what kind of main challenge does FME solve for clients is that a lot of our clients have data silos. Those data silos are often along or like departmental lines. Every department or business function of an organization usually has software specialized to suit its purposes or its needs. But most applications often require input or data that comes from other departments or other applications. And even if we centralize a lot of those databases and try to make them speak to each other, we still find ourselves with the challenge of having to change the nature of the data. So one example that we find really commonly, for instance, in like a growing need we find lately is organizations making like a single addressing authority, so they'd have like maybe one database to manage all their street addresses, and then use something like FME to make sure that all the other applications are kept up to date with that information. So the idea of being able to streamline the process of pushing information around, for instance. So what is FME? FME becomes that sort of solution in the middle. It's able to speak to the data of all these different systems, and often on the back end kind of performs the integration, allows organizations to push information around as they need to, in the format they need to, and when they need to, allowing everybody access to information they need. So what is FME? FME is a spatial ETL tool. So it's an ETL meaning extract, transform, and load, with a great emphasis on spatial, although it does connect to any sorts of data. So it's often, we often integrate data that's not even spatial data now. It could be data from a finance system or other kinds of applications, permit applications, for instance. It comes in, there's 3 different applications. So there's Fme Desktop. So Fme Desktop is where I could build my ETL processes or my data processes, and it's using a friendly interface of boxes and arrows that represent the tools and the flow the data is going to take and how it's going to be manipulated. So that's the Fme Desktop on the far left. Now I can run those processes in the Fme Desktop software, or I can actually run it on the Fme Server or the Fme Cloud platform. So the other 2 platforms don't allow me to create Fme workspaces, but they allow me new ways to execute those workspaces. So Fme Server is an enterprise application that I install in my organization, and usually it's installed on a server. Some of our clients, as they move towards the cloud, some of them are purchasing platform on the cloud, so maybe like an Azure environment or an Amazon environment, and they'll install an Fme Server there. So the idea is you own the software and you install it where you need it, usually close to your data. And then there's Fme Cloud, which is the same as Fme Server. So everything I'm going to show today on Fme Server is possible on Fme Cloud. The main difference is that Fme Cloud is a SaaS, a software as a service. So I don't have access to the back-end machine. So there are some limitations in terms of speaking to data. I might not be able to speak to things like ArcSDE databases with Esri, because I would need Esri software installed on that machine, so I wouldn't be able to do that. But if my data lives in the cloud and I'm using cloud-based applications, or it's an external-facing application, then Fme Cloud, which I pay for as I use, or for the size of machine I need to use, can become an interesting option. So whether I'm using server or cloud, the examples today kind of all pertain to what I could do. So what I do with Fme, I can connect my data sources, I can transform my data, and I can automate my workflow. So if I have Fme Desktop and an enterprise application like Server, it allows me to sort of create data workflows, connect to my sources, do what I need to do to the data, but also build an automation around that. Does it need to run a certain time every day? Does it need to run in response to another application or something like that? So this is a graphic that SAFE has kind of grown over the years. It used to just be simply number of formats and year to show that every year you could connect to more and more data formats. And now instead of just putting formats, they've kind of put a calendar out. So it's like kind of we have a number of formats. So FME supports somewhere in the 400 formats today, though it is difficult to put an actual limit on what is the number of formats, because we can speak, to APIs, and so we can connect to any application that has a REST or SOAP API, which kind of gives you a large boost in how many formats of data we could read. But now they've changed this graphic to show you and include the types of data that we can connect to. So GIS, CAD, database, XML, they didn't write JSON in there, but that would be in there. These formats, those are probably what the day-to-day of most of our clients have. So databases, XML type data, data coming from the web, CAD data, GIS data. And then when we see on the other end, we see some of the newer formats emerging. So some writing to some of the formats of some BI applications, indoor mapping format, augmented reality. So there's a few emerging, other types of formats that are out there, but most of the day-to-day of our clients, where they really get their day-to-day value, is in the GIS, CAD, database kind of space, raster, point clouds, things like that. So here's just an example of an FME workspace I'll show you just to explain really quickly Fme Desktop. So I'm going to open Fme Workbench 2019. You see the nice theme this year of Fme 2019. Okay, so here's a pretty small, simple process just to show what Fme Desktop looks like. So the brown box with the arrow coming out, or yellowish, this is a data source. And where I'm writing is this SQL Server database here at the end. And all the blue boxes that appear here are called the transformers, and they allow me to manipulate data. So this is a process that was done for a town that has traffic count data, and that they needed to download from the web on a regular basis. So the way it works is there are 5 traffic counters, so there are 5 Excel files, and we need to go and get today's month and today's year. We need to concatenate that with the ID of the traffic counter that we're getting from this Excel spreadsheet as the source. So we concatenate all that information together, use an HTTP crawler to go and download each file. Then we're using a feature reader, transformer, which allows me to go and read that data out of those files. And then here, basically, all these tools are just normalizing the data. So there are 2 different kinds of Excel spreadsheets. One of them has each hourly traffic count in a column, and we need to convert that to rows. So we actually have to pivot the data. So that's what the lower process is doing. And then at the end, what we do is once we normalize all the data according to the standard we need, it gets pushed into the SQL Server database. So the idea being that, this process is doing everything from downloading the data, normalizing it, and loading it in the database. So I can run this process by hitting the play button, and it will execute the process. I could run it as a batch file, and this is what a lot of our clients do until they find themselves running a lot of batch files. I had a fatal error, but I won't check that right now. The devil gods were not kind to me today. So basically, what I have here is a process that I can run these 2 different ways. But if I publish it to Fme Server, I get new ways that I can execute that process. So I'll just come back to my PowerPoint for a couple of slides. So what is Fme Server? So this allows me to, have automatic triggers to run my data, to run my processes, to basically be able to chain processes together, to have them run in response to different events. It gives me new ways I can, run these Fme processes. So what are the main things? So the things I chose to show today are how our clients really get their value. So there are some really cool things we can see with Fme Server that are super exciting, but I want to show where people get value with Fme Server. Like, what do people do with Fme Server on a daily basis, or what gets people to get Fme Server that get the most bang for their buck, basically. So there's three main things we do with Fme Server, and I'll show examples of each. So one is self-serve, one is scheduling, so the ability to schedule tasks, and event-driven actions. So event-driven actions is an Fme workspace or data process running in response to something happening. And lastly, all of the things I'm going to show on Fme Server, most of them are accessible via a REST API. So what does that mean? That means I can have an outside application run an Fme workspace, an Fme process. So I can, have another application that people are doing something in, and maybe in response to them selecting something or something, it'll send a job to the Fme server as well. So the first one I'll talk about is automation with Fme Server is managing process schedule. So a lot of our clients will start with Fme Desktop and run batch files with a Windows Task Scheduler, but then find themselves not really having a lot of feedback on whether those processes run. So they find themselves creating other scripts and other processes to basically monitor their schedules. When they get there, honestly, Fme Server it becomes really interesting at that point, because this allows you to schedule tasks, but also to kind of monitor that are working or be notified by email if something fails. And all that without having to write a script or program anything. It's all kind of point and click and assemble things together. So we'll use one example here. This is the example of a town in Ontario, and they presented their project several times to East Gwillimbury. And what they do is they have a scheduled task every night that integrates. So it's a quickly growing town, and they want to keep a dashboard up to date daily of how many properties are getting moved into their different development projects. So they have a scheduled task on Fme Server that allows them to integrate data from their permitting application, so new occupancies, with their parcel data, and to update that data layer in their web map. Now, the process itself does a number of things. It doesn't just do that. It also, at the same time, does some validation. Any joins that don't happen successfully, a report gets emailed back to the permitting department if the mistake is in the addresses that have come from the permit application. And on top of that, another report is built specifically for the Parks Department to send them an Excel file showing what the progress percentage-wise is. So instead of looking at the map and trying to figure out what the percentage along the development projects are, this is a simple report in Excel. So the Fme Server is taking care of integrating data, doing validation, sending emails, all with a scheduled task. And all of it was built with, basically without having to write any code or program anything. It's just the creation of different entities and objects on Fme Server and in Fme workspaces. So what does that look like on Fme Server? So if I come to my Fme Server here I'm logged in as the administrator. So being logged in as an administrator shows me that I can see everything that there is on the Fme Server. So now, naturally, there is security built into this, so I can have users that have way less privileges and only allowed to see certain things on the Fme Server. But I have access to everything. It makes it easier to demo. So let's say I want to build a new schedule. I can see all the schedules that are already set up here, how often they run. So at a glance, I kind of have an idea of what's going on. I can say new, so I can give my schedule a name. Planning occupancy map update is what I'll call it. I'll select a category. I'll put it in my nightly category. A category is just a grouping I create. I'll say repeat on interval. Okay, so I'm going to say once per day. I'm going to say start immediately rather than at a certain time. because I want to be able to see right away that it ran. Okay, but normally we'll schedule it to run. Let's say a lot of people will run their nightly tasks, at 1 o'clock in the morning or at 5 a.m. or something like that before the business day. So things that only need to be updated once a day usually get run at night. Workspace, so now I say which of my data processes that I want to run. So I look at the processes that I've published. So these are each one of these items, each one of these workspaces is something like this that's been published to Fme Server. So I can hit the publish button and I can send it to my Fme Server that's on my machine. So here I'm going to select it. So I'm going to use my permit workspace. And it has some options. It wants to know where is my data. So that's optional. That's how I built the process. I built the process that way in this case, but I might not have to pick that sort of information. So I'm just going to point to where I put it. And if I want, I could attach a notification to it so that if it succeeds or it fails, I can have it take another action after. That other action could be run another workspace. It could be send an email if I need to do that. In the advanced, I can also say how long this job can live in the queue, and there's some more advanced options to scheduling. But at its very basic, what people start with and what people do the most is you have schedules that run. We have a lot of clients that run nightly schedules, but they may also run them every hour. We have people who run schedules every 5 minutes, every minute. Or it could be once a month or once a week. Most people have a mix of schedules depending on depending on the business need, how fast the data is updated, how fast I need to integrate data into my system. So I have my schedule here. My schedule is on. I can see that I have 2 schedules that are on and all these other that are off. Thank God they're off because they run every 15 seconds, and I found myself with many, many, many jobs happening in my Fme server until I realized I had left those schedules on because it's a demo laptop. Here I have, I can see that my job just ran. So this is like right now. So it already completed. I can see that it was run by a schedule. So I can see the source. So I have some jobs that are run by schedule, some that are run by automation, that we'll talk about later. I can see that they were successful. Otherwise, I would have a red X. If I come down to the bottom here, I have a bunch of red X's. Those are jobs that I abandoned. That was my queue filling up. And I can see why. So I can actually get all the information about my process, how long it took to run. If something went wrong in it, I have a full log of it. I have what time it was dropped into the queuing process, what time it was picked up, what time it completed. So I have a bunch of interesting statistics to manage my data processes. Scheduled tasks, we have many clients that have, they may run 50 scheduled tasks a night, sometimes even more, sometimes it's 100, and there are all kinds of processes. Sometimes it's simply, a lot of it's data processes to move data from one system to another. So it could be keeping, data up to date among different systems. It can be preparing data for other applications. We have, for instance, let's say we have a Fme process that creates JSON data that's supposed to be ingested into Elasticsearch or something like that into another application. So we prepare it so the data gets prepared on a daily basis to get ingested into another system. Often people are using it to prepare data for 911 and other systems like that. A lot of people use it to prepare what I call like derived data products. So, run my new parcel data against my taxation data to create, a specialized layer or specialized information. Preparing data for open data portals and stuff like that as well. So there's all kinds of uses of the scheduled tasks. We have some people who run very, very frequent jobs to pull data from web feeds and stuff to keep, tracking information or archiving information into a database and stuff like that. So that's the schedule. Another main use of Fme that a lot of people, use and, get benefits from is the self-serve side of it. So, so I can schedule Fme workspaces, but I can also choose to run Fme workspaces on demand. So there's several ways that people do this. So why people use this? This allows me to have people execute the data process who don't have FME on their machine, don't know what it is, maybe shouldn't have access to being able to manipulate the process. They're just people who consume the results of that data process. Except that process, running it on the schedule, maybe isn't sufficient. It needs to be run when they choose to run it, for instance. So a lot of our clients would start with Fme Desktop and then install a bunch of Fme Desktops across their organization, show people how to run the Fme workspace and not to touch anything else, and just follow these steps. Then they need access to the workspace, to the data, and to all these things. And then they find themselves keeping sharing their license with people who are just executing processes. So in this kind of scenario with Fme Server, it lets me have Fme Desktop reserved for people who know how to create the data processes, and so they become the authors, and then other people who are just running Fme workspaces or just running these data processes just become the consumers of it. And I can control. What's interesting is that, there's different ways I can do it. So the first way I'll show is using the Fme Server interface. So I can give somebody access to just certain applications. It's simple to use. You don't need to build a web page. You use just simply Fme's web page. And if the options to run the script are simple, this is a way to get a service out there very quickly to your users without having to build a lot around it. So if it's a very simple process, and maybe it's not a process that will run forever. Maybe it's like in the space of a project, somebody needs access to run a data process or something like that. FME's basic web page can serve for those purposes. So we have lots of people who use this for simple things, or even among colleagues within a group, upload your file and, get it converted quickly into something else. That's a very popular example. And what's interesting about using Fme Server for your on-demand processes is that you get additional information. So when you have the Fme Desktop and people using the desktop, you don't really have a trace. You don't know how often is your process being run. Is it being run successfully? Are people having, you can control access to it better with Fme Server. People interact with it via a web page. And now you kind of can monitor usage of your service. You know how often it's run. You know how long it takes to run. And so you have some interesting statistics and information to manage your service. Plus, you don't have to make sure, and this is one of the things that a lot of people have mentioned to us, that make sure that now across your organization, all these people who do nothing but just run workspaces all have the right version of Fme installed on their machine, the same version as the people who are creating them, and then it makes more infrastructure to manage. I'll also show an example if the website works, which it did earlier, so it should. Of one of our clients who built themselves an on-demand service but using the REST services. So instead of using Fme Server's web page, the idea of using another whole web page and then using the REST service to push a request to Fme Server from another application. This is another example. I won't show it today, but instead of data extraction using the REST services, we also have a lot of people doing data upload on demand as well. So the idea of somebody sending a file in and then Fme Server ingesting that file and processing it and then returning a response to the user. So this is people uploading information to the Fme Server. This example is using the REST services where they want to control the interface rather than using Fme Server's example. And finally, we'll look at an example of using the Fme Server app. I probably won't use my phone. I'll just use the browser because it's still too experimental to use my phone. But the idea being that Fme Server now has an even simpler way to share those processes with other users, and you can use it. You can use the Fme app, and it's available on Android and iOS. And people can connect to the process and run anything that streams back a result, basically. Okay, so we'll look at these different kinds of examples. So if I wanted to just simply run a process, I can connect to run a workspace, and then I would have access to just the ones that my user has been given access to. So this could be a very limited view if I was just a user. And I might come in here and I might say, I can choose what kind of service. So there's a few ways I can say run my workspace, run my workspace simply, or I could say run my workspace with the data streaming service or with the data download service. So with the data streaming service, it will send me back the results. So in this workspace, the process like this, at the end, writes just simply an HTML file. So if I run this with the streaming service, it's going to return that HTML page straight to me. So it processed the data and created me this Vancouver library report, which is just one of the simple examples from the training, but I like it because it shows like how simple getting the response is through the streaming service. So I have a little table here, statistics that are built, and a map at the end. So all of this is built in the Fme workspace using some simple transformers. So that's one way. If I run a process using, for instance, so if I wanted to run that same process that I ran a schedule for, I'll run that with the job submitter service because I want that just to simply run the process and update my existing database. So I don't want it to return me a result. I want it to run a data process within my organization. I'm going to use the job submitter service, and I can choose my data. And hit the run button, and it'll execute my process. So the job submitter service, I'll use it to update processes that update data internally usually, and the streaming service is when I create a simple process like something that returns an Excel file or an HTML file, and then I want to wait and receive the results directly. It's the person who publishes the workspace, the author, who decides which services the Fme workspace can be run with. So it's not the user that decides who's running the workspace, it's the author who decides what is logical for that particular service. So that's an example of running a workspace in the Fme server interface. If I look at the other example, the one that's fronted with a REST API, I'm going to try this. If it doesn't open the link directly, then yeah, it often doesn't work directly from my PowerPoint. If it opens Edge. So I'll just go directly to it. So here I have an application. So this is just a GeoCortex web application served from their Esri data. And I can, as a user here, zoom into this map. So Fme Server is not in this page. So the person or the user interacting with this page doesn't know that Fme Server is behind the scenes on it. So I can draw myself an area, and I can pick, the layer I want, what format I want the data in, and then I can write my email, and then tell it that I'm not a robot. I'm 50-50 at typing those things in properly, but looks like I won today. And now I'll get an email when it's done with the data clipped out to the zone I've asked for. So people usually use this kind of service. Like here it's being used for open data, but one of the most popular uses of this kind of Fme service is when people want to offer like GIS to CAD applications or GIS to very specific data packages, like a road paving project or things like that, where I want to deliver data to a contractor or something in a very specific format, and up-to-date data structured a certain way for a specific geographic area that changes all the time. So this prevents me from having to download large amounts of data and then clipping it out. So this is an interesting use for those kinds of projects, especially. Because with the Fme, I'm able to produce a CAD file that, with the proper layering and colors and block types or cell types. And so I'm able to create a structured CAD file, so it's really interesting in those cases. The other on-demand example I wanted to show, this self-serve using an app, is this is a newer feature that when I come here and I have an Fme workspace, if I wanted to share it a little bit more easily with my users, I could come here as an advanced user now, as the person who owns this process, I'm allowed to do this. Like, I have advanced options for running the process. Not anybody would be able to go out and share the workspace if they had limited permissions. So I can say, okay, share this workspace, allow users to run it without logging in, and it'll give me an expiration date. I'll click OK, and it'll build me a URL to serve my app. So what does that mean? Like, if I click on the app, if I click on that link, I can provide this link to my users. They're not logged into the Fme Server webpage. They have a single limited view, and they can just run this, for instance. So this would allow me to come in and drag and drop my files, for instance, let's say, and hit run and send the job off. So this works as well with the Fme Server app. And so this gives an interesting option for people to make it even simpler to just use the out-of-the-box thing. Don't forget, if you do have any questions, you can type them into the chat bar, and then Marco is watching he's watching the chat box, so that we'll get back to you guys with answers when we can. So that is the idea of, self-serve. So we've seen self-serve in different forms, fronted by another application, or straight in the Fme Server application, either as an app or logged into the page. The last example I wanted to give today that I find that is gives people a lot of value is the idea of the automation. So the automations take the notion that's existed a long time in Fme Server called notifications, but gives us now a graphical way to be able to define these things, which is very interesting because it gives us a kind of a workflow view of chaining together, actions and events and, tasks with Fme in a visual manner. So it kind of matches the style of doing things with Fme. So it gives me, a visual drag and drop interface rather than the traditional way of creating notifications, which is creating, different objects and linking them together one by one or manually. This gives me a nice visual. So I've built one here today. So I'm just going to go back to my Fme Server, go to my automation, and I can come to my water meter automation that I've created. So I'm going to hit stop automation because I can't edit it if it's already running. So basically, I can I'll delete this one and I'll rebuild it just to show how it works. So the way I've set this thing up here is I have an action here. So this is a directory modified trigger, but these are the actions that it could. So it could watch for an FTP site. It could watch an email box, a Dropbox location, an S3 bucket on Amazon. So these are things that can trigger it to run, or simply an Fme Server topic, so a notification. So if another application, such as Salesforce or something, had a webhook, it could push a request to trigger this workflow to start, for instance. So I'm watching for a folder. I'm telling it what folder I'm watching for. The next action it says, so when it sees a file arrive in the folder, it's going to send that information about the file to my filter. And I'm saying if the name of the file, so that's the file path, contains the word water meters, then if successful, move on to the next step, which is run the water meters workspace. So here, somebody's going to come in, drop their water meter file into Excel file into a folder, and that will trigger this process to run. So I'm watching every 15 seconds, and I'm asking it to run this process. And then, if successful, I'm saying send me an email. So I removed the other one, but just so I could rebuild it. So if I say, okay, attach another external action. So kind of like Fme, I create an object, I connect it with an arrow, Now I'm going to configure that action. So I'm going to say, so I could be pushing an HTTP request, so I could be notifying some other application that has a notification system, or I can simply say, send me an email. I'm going to tell it to connect to Office 365. It won't work today because I'm on our network, and I know this port is particularly blocked, and my IT people didn't have a chance to unblock that port for me. It only works if I'm tethered on my phone, but I will set it up anyways. So start TLS, pick my security type. I'm going to say who I'm going to email to. I'm going to email myself, from myself, failed, put a message for myself. I can hit validate. It won't work though, I know that, so I'm just going to hit apply and not listen to the message where it's going to get angry. And here I have another action. I can also, so once I finish building my automation, I just want to make sure this guy is set up properly. So, okay, water meters, installation, and okay. I'm going to assume it's still set up right. This is okay. And once I'm ready, now I can save my automation, and I'm going to hit start. So now it's active, okay? So if I come here, I can now drop a file in my folder. In this case, my folder is on the Fme server, but it could be a folder somewhere else on my network. And I'm going to go and get, okay, so I'm going to go and get, where is that file? Okay, right, I'm going to download the file, rename it, and because I'm not watching for a change file, and I'm just going to upload it here. Then I can go back to my automation, and I can actually ask to see the log of the running automation. So I should be able to, it finished assembling the automation. It checks every 15 seconds. I'm going to ask it to refresh. I see now that it says my Fme engine encountered a failure, which I'm not surprised at, but I'm expecting a failure. But it's just to show that it did trigger the job to run. My engine encountered a failure probably because it's sending email with, so now you see it's sending the email to me at the end saying that the job failed. So the idea with the automations is that I can have automations that are triggered from a schedule, from a directory watcher, from another action, and then I can chain a number of things to run. So a popular use of this is if I have more than one workspace that has to run in a row, I can easily visually chain them together and manage the process. So our objective today was basically to give what do most of our clients get day-to-day as value from the Fme Server, and it really is a mix of all of these things. So we really see them using Fme Server like the simple things that don't take a lot of development. It's a lot of just configuring the Fme Server to do actions that would often require scripting or something else. It's easy to, it gives us a dashboard. We can see our processes. We can see if they're working. We can control which version of the workspace is being run. We know how often it's being used. We know where our data is moving in the organization. And so it allows us to have a one kind of management spot for scheduling our workspaces, having people run them when they need, and having them, run automatically based on different events. So most of our clients do kind of a mix of all of these things, but this is where people really find the value for Fme. So I hope you found some interesting ideas on how you can leverage Fme Server and, to enhance what you're already probably doing with Fme Desktop today.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Leslie. Thank you for this presentation. So we're going to take questions. I don't know if any of you have questions. For everyone else, you can just email Leslie if you have any questions on Fme Server. Her email address is on screen, leslie@consortech.com. And thank you, everyone, for being with us today. Have a great day.